Hello, everybody. This is Mark Rivera of the YouTube channel Genre Online Net, and this is the film The Last Man on Earth, which is the first of three adaptations of Richard Matheson's classic book I Am Legend. And of the three that have been produced based on this book that was released in 1954, this one is still the most faithful to that original novel despite some differences. Mr. Matheson actually participated in the script for this particular version of the film, though he wasn't particularly happy with the results, so he wrote it under a pseudonym. Nevertheless, the film, though it was not a huge hit when it was originally released, has developed a cult following, and some also think because of the nature of the way the vampire-like creatures are demonstrated in this film, that perhaps George A. Romero, who himself was actually inspired to do the Living Dead series from Matheson's novel I Am Legend, may have also gotten some inspiration from this film starring Vincent Price. Now, as you can see here in this particular frame, there's a reason why I chose to open the film with this type of harsh green tone. And basically the reason why I did that is I wanted to basically give a type of visual clue that shows you basically that for all the dusk and dawn scenes in the film, there is a transition from the darkness to the light. And so we have this green filter here basically that gives it a kind of sickly tone, since this is already after the virus has devastated the human race. And so we have Vincent Price here, and I just wanted to get that across visually using filters, just so that when people saw this, that eventually they'd get the idea, okay, every time it's turning green, it's because we're getting into the night, or we're going to go back out of the night into the day. Now, this film was shot in location in Italy to save money, and it was originally going to be produced by Hammer Studios, but the rights were sold, and the person who bought the rights basically wanted to shoot it on location in Italy to take advantage of the cheaper work that would be available from the actors that were not necessarily union actors, especially for that time period, and the crew. So it was shot on location with Italy, and basically, although this is an American film, sometimes you could definitely tell that the actors, much like the spaghetti westerns and so forth, you could kind of tell that there's a different quality to the way the filmmaking is done, and I think that's to the benefit of the film. Now, another major change that I made to this version of the film that the original does not have is I cut out all the voiceover dialogues of what Vincent Price is thinking, and the reason why I did that is because I felt that it repeated too much information that you're going to learn anyway as you watch the story just by seeing the film language. And film is a visual medium. You're supposed to tell it with images and sound, yes, but sometimes, although there are points where sometimes a voiceover is necessary to communicate something that the visuals and sound otherwise cannot get across, I just felt that the voiceovers took away from the eerie quality of this post-apocalyptic setting, and I felt that it just kind of narrated the action too much. Now, those of you who disagree with me, that's perfectly fine. I don't consider this to be like a product or anything like this. This is more of an experiment for me personally, as a former film student from way back, as well as a fan of this film.
KOKW
So
Come in.
I just felt that, there you could still download or stream for free the original theatrical version of The Last Man on Earth, and this is just my particular take on it. And I actually, if you, there'll be a link in the description where you'll see how to watch this without the commentary, and there's a little text opening, and I basically state what my reasons are in that text opening. And since this is a public domain film, I don't actually want this version of the film ever to be monetized, because it's not a final product. It's just an experiment, and you know, we're always learning, and the only way you learn is by doing. And so even this commentary that I'm recording now as I rewatch the film another time is basically an experiment in of itself for myself personally, and I'm sure you all will leave a feedback for me on how you like it or dislike it, and what you think can be improved or not improved for future commentaries of public domain feature films and whatnot. However, as we move along now, this film was not a hit when it first was released, but has grown a cult following, and some consider it to be one of Vincent Price's best films. And I don't know about that personally, but I do think it's one of his better films. And it was released in 1964, and you can see, you know, he, in my opinion, he's a good leading man for this role. A critic who wrote the book World Gone Wild, Post-Apocalyptic Cinema, felt that he was a little too prissy for the role, but I disagree. I think he's perfect, since he's trying to play a viral doctor and somebody that does experimental research on pandemics and that such thing. And so basically, I think he works just fine. Now here, as you see, we've transitioned out of the green to this kind of rustic look, which is pretty much the color tone of the black and white rustic look for this post-apocalyptic setting. Now we're going to move on to the fire pit, which is seen in the film, and you'll see an immediate color change just to get across this is the fire pit where the dead bodies are disposed of. It just adds a nice little effect, I thought, you know. So every day he takes the bodies of the dead that he disposes of, either by stake or that he finds, and he puts them in the fire as they were being put into the fire before. So can you imagine the horrible stench of this, since he's got to wear a gas mask and take these bodies and throw them into the fire so that they don't resurrect the next night, if they haven't already been prevented from resurrecting by getting a stake through the heart. So I actually like this sequence a lot. This is something that we never got to see in any of the other versions, and I really do feel that it adds to the tragedy of the whole story. So, you know, basically, this was just kind of my own way of emphasizing what this area was, and that's the reason why I chose the color palette. So pretty much you have green for dusk and dawn, this type of rustic black and white look for the day scenes, and then what you just saw now, a different filter for the fire pit scenes. Now, Richard Matheson, who I believe I mentioned already, wrote the screenplay under a pseudonym. Originally, he thought this was going to be directed by Fritz Lang, and of course it was not. But since the film was released and it was followed subsequently by the film The Omega Man, and then I Am Legend in the 2000s starring Will Smith, The Omega Man featured Charlton Heston in the lead role as the Doctor. He said that of all the versions that exist, the original theatrical cut, because I just want to make that clear, not my version, the theatrical cut, is the one that's closest to the book. So that's another reason why I like this film, is that I have the book, and I know it well, and this in my opinion, is probably about as close to I Am Legend as we're likely to get anytime soon, as being a more direct adaptation. And I really think that it works. Sure, I've never seen vampires react more like zombies as they do in this film, but they work just fine. I mean, they're a bit inconsistent, but even in feature films as well as television shows like The Walking Dead, as it went through certain seasons, the early seasons had the zombies doing a little bit more than just being able to shamble around. And now they've retconned that to say, well, those were the variants. And that, for those of you who watch the series, you know what I'm talking about. So what I'm trying to say is that basically the dead things, particularly things that resemble zombies, kind of have been inconsistent on film for the most part. And so while these are not zombies, it's supposed to be vampires, they kind of are a bit of both. And I don't think there's really any other film that has anything quite like that, other than films that usually have something that's more akin to a decaying version of a zombie like Rivera did. So once again, I just think that this works a lot better, showing the montage of his day without the voiceover. I think it's a little bit more disturbing, it's creepier, and also ultimately it's a visual storytelling medium, so you really don't need a voiceover in my opinion. So, but it's like Blade Runner in the sense that there's the 1982 theatrical cut, which has the Harrison Ford voiceover, and then there's the director's cut from 1992 and the 2007 final cut that omits that voiceover. And I've known people that actually love the Harrison Ford voiceover and prefer that version. So this doesn't replace the original theatrical cut. This is just its own thing, and the original still exists, so don't freak out. It's just my own personal artistic choice on this particular version of the film, which is in the public domain, by the way, and it's licensed under a Creative Commons Public Domain Mark 1.0 license. Now, as we see here, we've transitioned from that rustic black and white back to the green to get across the dusk coming, the night is coming, and I have to agree with one thing that was said by the critic who wrote the book, World Gone Wild, Post-Apocalyptic Cinema, and that is that the house, which is supposed to be like a fortress, doesn't really seem that impregnable. In fact, I really think that the dead, as you see here, could pretty much just barge right in. I mean, there's not really a heck of a lot keeping them out, but for the sake of the story, it is what it is, So each day he does what he has to do, and then in the night he endures this type of, it's supposed to be a siege, but it's more like a stumbling. And basically, this is kind of the framing device, how we get to see what the world was like before the apocalypse happened. And for those scenes, I take us out of this framing of rustic type of muted colors or muted shades to the traditional black and white footage that is in the movie, and you'll see later on when they do the flashback to pre-apocalypse. Once again, now we're back in the morning, so the green filter is being used, and by this point I would expect that the viewers who are watching this version of the film on my YouTube channel will have gotten the idea that that's what it means. That's just a visual cue. Is it necessary? Well, it's not really necessary. It's just me exploring, me experimenting. And that's the thing, as film, we're all film students, as film buffs, regardless of whether we're professional or amateurs or somewhere in between. And so when I do certain things with films, I like to go by my instincts and my intuition. And so I had been experimenting earlier with rotoscoping feature films to mixed results, but I found that certain films like For a Few Dollars More or Once Upon a Time in the West actually really looked cool when you put the comic book filter over it to make it look like a kind of motion graphic novel, albeit somewhere in between, because it's obvious that it's not still pictures, it's actual moving footage. And yes, we've seen films like Waking Life and A Scanner Darkly that used rotoscoping that were at the time more cutting edge. But it just goes to show you that what was once probably would cost millions of dollars to do, I was able to do these types of experiments literally on my iPhone using iMovie and the filter choices there and some other apps to sometimes create different hues. I've discovered a lot of tricks along the way to kind of mix colors using different filters and different takes and compositing them together and doing it in a way that for me personally works fine, especially since this is still a young channel. I've only been online since February on YouTube, and I really appreciate your support. So here, we go into this crypt where he keeps his wife's body, and we'll go into that backstory in a little bit. But basically, it's another one of those scenes that just supposed to give across the idea that, okay, even in the morning, or depends on where there's not any sunlight coming in for these type of dusk and dawn scenes, this is also the color palette that you'll get in the post-apocalyptic scenes that is the majority of the film. I think that Vincent Price did a great job in this film. I mean, personally, I don't know what my favorite Vincent Price film is. I really love House on Haunted Hill. In fact, I think that's one of his better films. And I think it still holds up and works well today, particularly because of the fact that it may not be as scary to people that the gimmicks that were used by William Castle when that film was premiered in the 50s or whatnot, or 60s I should say, but it did nevertheless have a quality to it that when you look at it now, I just think it actually still holds up better than the remake that came out in the early 2000s with Jeffrey Rush. I like this particular sequence because this kind of reminds me of the Dead films of Romero, where sometimes you can just walk through these shambling creatures and you don't need a lot to get through them. If there's a few enough, so long as they don't swarm you, you can get by them. You can push them off of you, and we've seen that plenty of times in all sorts of zombie motion pictures and television shows. But outside of that, these aren't zombies per se. They're something in between. I mean, I really would love to know what they were thinking when they decided to depict it this way. And my guess is that they probably thought that the creatures wanted them to be different. And in my humble opinion, they were different for that time period. But in the book, the vampires are more vampire-like, and they have the same weaknesses of a vampire. And so, I think that the best version of the story will always be Richard Matheson's novel. But for now, anyway, this probably is more than likely going to be as close as we get to it, considering, we've now had the film adapted 3 times. First with The Last Man on Earth, and then in the 1970s with The Omega Man starring Charlton Heston, and then of course in around 2007 with Will Smith. That part kind of makes me laugh, which is why I paused there for the moment. The ow, ow, that sort of thing, because it really, I don't know, it just sort of feels like it's out of character. Like these creatures, I don't know what to make of them. They feel pain when you're slamming doors on them, uh, and I don't know. It's just, I just think it's kind of funny. That's all. Now we're going to go into the pre-apocalyptic sequences where the film goes right into its original black and white pristine form, untouched, aside from maybe some digital cleaning that I did, using, again, over-the-counter software that you can download from the App Store on iTunes. I really like some of these scenes here with Vincent Price. I mean, it's kind of, I gotta hand it to actors like Price and basically anyone who can pull off laughing and crying on a dime in front of you. Or like say Shatner in Star Trek, he would like scream really loud and sometimes, and like I'm not an actor, so I'd be embarrassed if I was doing some of these things. But here he is, he's selling both the tragedy with first laughing, and then it goes right into crying. So it's really gets off the idea of madness. Um, After 3 years living in the apocalypse, he's not the same man that he was in the beginning. But it is a great transition how he does it, and so I admire the fact that actors can do that sort of thing. It's just something that me personally, as a person that's not an actor, I can't personally do that, but I admire those who could. So here we are now, we're back in time, 1965, in the movie's timeline, since the movie's supposed to take place in 1968. Once again, this film was also released in 1964, so basically, at the time of its theatrical release, the entire movie, you could say, takes place in the future of whatever that was released in 1964. But, now it seems more like an alternate history, given the fashions and cars and whatnot. This is when we start to learn about how the pandemic is spreading by air. And later on in the script, we learn that at least theorized, the reason why Vincent Price's character is immune is he was bitten by a bat at some point early in his life, and now he's the last man on earth, and he was trying to synthesize something for the pandemic, and you could see right here it's airborne.
Highly theoretical, Ben.
Theoretical? Do I have to remind you that theory is a beginning of solution?
This is actually a good relationship. In the book, this is given more shock value because the person who works with Neville is revealed to be one of the vampires that basically comes to his home every night to stalk him, if you will.
I'm a scientist, not an alarmist.
You're whistling past the graveyard.
Is that a commentary on my work at the lab?
We both know how hard you've worked.
I'm sorry, Ben. I just can't
This
accept
particular
the
part of the
idea
film actually reminds
universal
me of the
disease.
first season of Fear the Walking Dead, mainly because in the early
All right,
episodes of
Kathy.
that particular
Who can
season,
resist
we
that
have
face?
a student character that's
All
been
right.
reading rumors
Card
on the
tricks.
internet
Card
about
tricks.
a disease where the dead are coming back to life,
Robert,
and here we have this type of
is it
rumor
possible this
being
germ or
spread,
virus could
and of
be
course
airborne?
in both Fear the Walking Dead early
Anything
on,
is possible,
and
Verge.
in this particular
The best
film,
brains
The
in the world
Last Man on
have
Earth,
been running
uh,
through this thing with a
people
fine-tooth
don't
comb.
believe
The germ is
what's
visible under a
happening,
microscope, but it's
and
not
they
like
don't
any
start to
bacilli I
question
ever
it
known.
until late in the game. And so, in
Lovely.
my humble opinion,
It can't
Vincent
be
Price's
destroyed by
character
any
is
process
perhaps
we've been able to uncover.
pragmatic to a
But
fault,
with the whole
and
world
that
trying, there
ultimately
must be a
will
solution.
affect how things work out in this story. He's just such a slave to science,
Right now,
and
our problem is to
he
cut
is
that cake.
not taking rumors of anything that's not scientifically based
Coming, coming.
seriously, and ultimately he suffers for that up until the very end of the film. Now, this is a nice transition they have here. Gets across that idea of the disease. You know, there's less people, the wind is blowing, signifying airborne, you know, and here his daughter has caught the virus, and there's some steps, just like there are in zombie fiction, as to what happens to a person when they get the virus. There's basically weakness, then for some reason blindness occurs, and then eventually death. And then, unless the bodies are destroyed, the person resurrects as this type of zombie vampire hybrid, which is, as I said already, is the only thing in the film that you can really describe these creatures. And I still wish that they were more like the novel, because in the novel they are more traditional vampire-like, with still the same vampire weaknesses that are shown here: garlic, mirrors,
Wind wake you
stake
up?
through the heart, etc.
It always
But
does.
they are
How do
not
you feel?
shambling corpses
I'm all
Oh,
right.
like
don't
in this
get up,
film.
honey.
You know,
I'm not sick,
um,
Bob. I'll make
You
her
don't
the
have to.
the
I'll
film
be all right. Go on
still
and read your
holds up,
paper.
though, when you consider
Right.
the Charlton Heston version, the Omega Man, uh, the victims of the plague that are still alive. In some form, it's never really clearly stated whether they're undead or not. Uh, they seem like evil hippies in a commune that have gone Luddite. You know what I mean? And then in the 2007 version, uh, they look like Emotep from The Mummy, with these big jowls, excuse me, that come down, and the CGI doesn't really hold up even by modern
Oh, sweetheart, look,
standards.
if you don't feel well,
But
please go
over
back to
here,
bed.
I'm just a
the
little tired,
practical
that's all.
effects do work, and here
Wish
it's
somebody would find a
definitely
vaccine.
clear that
It's all
we're
we're working
dealing
on
with
at the lab,
something
Burge.
that is
Maybe you better
supernatural,
not
if
send her to
not
school
in
today.
the magical sense. It is supernatural in the manner that
You think you should go to...
I have
we
to.
Oh, Bob,
are dealing with something
Bob,
that has
I'm so
never been
frightened.
seen, documented
Everything's gonna be
by
all right,
humanity before. And so, in that respect, it is supernatural because it is out of the ordinary. If you notice, there's less traffic. These settings look really beautiful. They add a nice quality to the film. Um, uh, the architecture, it's just beautiful. Italy's a beautiful place. And, now we learn a little bit more about the virus and its airborne
The bacilli are
qualities,
multiplying.
as well
That kicks the
as
bone marrow theory in the head.
the,
This
the way
specimen
it
shows a
confounds
higher white
researchers.
count than when I put it on the slide. Those cells are still living, Dr. Mercer, off one another.
There has to be an answer. You heard that all communications are ended outside the continental limits?
Yes, I heard.
That leaves it in our laps. So we keep trying. Where's Cortman?
Well, he should be here by now.
You two stay on this virus theory until I decide it's exhausted.
Right.
Okay, so,
Yes, sir?
Morgan
this
said
is
you-
the character
All right,
that
sir.
we've actually seen in the post-apocalyptic scenes.
And what did the
Is
great man of
particularly
science have to say today?
stalking
More of the
Robert,
usual?
Oh, he's
the
trying,
character
Ben,
that
just like the rest of us.
Vincent
And
Price
nothing
is
works.
playing in the film.
The streets are swarming
He's
with
kind of
truckloads
your
of bodies
hero
that they're
zombie,
throwing
if you
into
want
that
to call him
god-awful
that.
pit.
What I mean by
And the
hero
dedicated
zombie
Dr.
is
Mercer goes on with his
it's
plotting
usually
an
an undead
imaginative
character
approach.
You have a
that
better idea?
uh,
Maybe.
is
At least
distinct
it
from the
involves
other ones that
imagination.
you
Then it's
associate.
as
So,
simple as
uh,
this. An
in Night of the
unknown
Living
germ is
Dead, it's
being
the
blown
Bernard
around the
Hines zombie
world.
that
It's
attacks
highly contagious and it's reached
Barbara and
plague
her brother
proportions.
at the
And you
very
don't believe
beginning of
some
the
of the dead
film.
have come
He's the
back?
one that, that's the
Now
most
let's get to
iconic of
work.
the zombies in terms of, actually
why are they
moving
burning
and
the
not just
bodies?
being a
Why don't they
still
bury
shot or
them?
that sort of thing.
Because it's the best
In
known
Dawn
way
of
to
the original
control the
Dawn of the
contagion,
Dead,
to keep the germ
uh,
from spreading.
because of the movie
That's what we've
poster,
always
that
believed
one
at any rate.
zombie that appears
There are
in the
stories
doorway of
being told, Bob.
By
the
people who are
small
out of their
little
minds with fear.
airport type gas
Maybe.
station
But there are too
that
many
they
to be
stop
just
off in to fuel
coincidental.
up the helicopter
Stories
is
about people
kind
who
of the
died
hero
and
zombie. Although in that
have come
film
back.
they had some
They're
great
stories,
local
Ben, stories.
And why are the
character from the
infected people
talent
always
pool,
so
as
tired
well
in
as
the
the
daytime?
extras that came flocking
Why
to
can't they
work
stand
on
the
it.
sunlight?
And it still remains
are they
probably the
only
most
seen at
popular of
night?
the original trilogy. Uh,
Come
Bub,
in.
the zombie from Day of the Dead, is obviously the hero
Look.
zombie there. He's
I know his
featured
fellas.
in the home video artwork, and I saw that one in the theater,
Now,
believe
is
it or
this
not. And
bacilli
I
or
still
isn't
don't
it?
exactly
It doesn't alter.
recall
And
what
this
the theatrical
bacilli is
one
found
sheet
in
was
the blood
anymore,
of
whether
every
if it was the
infected
original
person, or
VHS
isn't it?
cover
To show me
or
terms
not.
is not to refute
But
these
nevertheless,
stories, Bob.
Come on,
he
let's
is
get
the
to work.
hero zombie and the most advanced that we've seen since. Of course, Land of the Dead, you have Big Daddy, and then
And
in
until further
both
notice, this station will
the
continue its
sideways
round-the-clock coverage of this
prequels
national disaster.
of
And now, we switch
Diary
you to the
and
governor
Survival,
from the
you don't
executive
necessarily have a
mansion.
hero zombie because there you're going
Further, I
back to the
have,
beginning
in
again, and
conjunction with the federal
shortly
government,
afterwards with events that
declared
take
this
place
state to be
somewhat
a
parallel
disaster
to
area.
Night of the Living
Public health
Dead
is
and
dependent on
Dawn of the
bodies of
Dead,
deceased being burned.
albeit
You must notify the
it's
health
just a
department
slight
immediately.
parallel
Have a
timeline.
fake
They're not
record of your
exactly
Under no circumstances should you
occurring
gather
back to
public.
back.
In view of the
It's
dire emergency
kind of
that
like, again,
exists,
Fear the
I
Walking
intend
Dead and The Walking Dead with these time jumps. It could be hard to know exactly
Anything
what was in
new?
mind. And I remember interviewing
nothing
Rivera, and I was asking him, well, how much time takes place in between such and such a film? And he was like, well, now you're asking me to tell a story. And I understood what he meant by that you don't you don't necessarily get like hard actions. So he was like saying to me, well, that's the reason why in Land of the Dead I mentioned 3 years, and that's the only reference I ever made
I'm going to
in the
call the
entire
doctor.
series
I said
that's
no.
that results to how long it took to get to this state in the world.
Virg, there's
And
nothing they
then I
can
pointed
do.
out that in
You can't just let her
Dawn of the
lie
Dead,
there.
Well, this way
and
she has
this
a
was
chance.
confirmed, and he was
If
he
you
actually
call
paid me
a
a
doctor,
compliment
he'll
telling me,
report it.
you know my films better than
want
I
that?
do. That basically Dawn of the Dead takes place 3 weeks after the events of Night of the Living Dead. It's clearly stated or implied through dialogue in the television studio scene. So it's also clearly
How can
stated
you
over
be so
here, as I
sure
mentioned
she-
Blindness
earlier,
is one of the
that this
symptoms.
film takes place 3 years
You're not to call a doctor under
after
any
the
circumstances.
virus outbreak in
No one is to come
1965,
into
which
this
was
house.
again a year
Now remember that.
that would follow the original 1964 release year of this movie. You see the daughter starting to succumb. She's losing her eyesight.
I've got to
Uh,
pick Ben Cortland up on the way to the
You know,
lab.
there's a lot of tragedy in
No
this
one is to
story. I
come
mean,
into
this
this
is not
house.
a feel-good movie,
Now remember
but
that.
to its credit, it's not depressingly. Basically, it doesn't make you feel like like you need to take a sonic shower or something after you've seen it. But I do like the sequences, with the military taking away the bodies of the dead by force. It's something, again, that Romero has in the beginning of Dawn. So I think there's a good indicator beyond what Romero said, that Night of the Living Dead was inspired by the novel. Richard Matheson wrote I Am Legend. And maybe he did see this film, and maybe it was one of the inspirations for Night of the Living Dead as well. I cannot say for certain. That's not something that I ever asked Romero about, but when I did interview him back around 2005,
Who's there?
you
It's
know,
me, Ben.
we did speak
We're
about
late.
timelines, and I just find all these things more interesting now. So now we see here in the film that
Ben,
his
what's the matter with
partner
you?
is also succumbing to the disease,
Nothing, and I'm going to keep it that way.
and
Ben,
he's becoming
look,
more
let's talk about this.
kind of like the
There's
Shane
nothing to
character
talk
in this,
about.
with respect to he's becoming
think I'm
belligerent,
out of my mind.
antisocial, that sort of thing.
You laughed at me
Although
and my
Shane,
theory.
of course, different reasons.
You
and it
might
was
be one
not
of them.
the
Ben,
fact
look,
that
you're guilt. You ought to see a
infection
doctor.
was making
No
him that way,
doctors.
other than the
You
affection
take care of your life, I'll
of
take care
lust
of
and
mine.
envy that he had for Rick,
Now get away
and
from here.
his feeling that
You understand? Get away from here.
Rick was a detriment, and in some ways, Shane's philosophy, which, albeit dark, turns out to be the right way to go in certain cases. But Shane was too far gone by the point in the second season when Rick had to take him out. But it just reminds me of that. And so there's no infidelity in this movie, but nevertheless, it's just these are guys that were friends. He was visiting his daughter on her birthday, and now, while they're both still alive, they hate each other. And then when this guy is returned back from the dead, it's even worse. And at a certain point in the story, later on, where a character asks the Price character, "What would you do if you saw your friend today?" And he says, "I would put a stake through his heart," which again emphasizes the pragmatic nature of the protagonist. And what ultimately spells his undoing in some ways is the fact that he is inflexible. I mean, he's a brilliant man. It's a chance that he has survived
If
this
you're
long.
looking for anybody but me,
But
get it.
otherwise, he is the last man on the post. I mean, he is the,
Are they
Robert
all
Neville,
gone?
which is the name of the character
right.
in the second
Is
and
there
third
any hope from the
adaptations.
latest reports?
For some reason, they changed the last name for
Not yet.
the last man on Earth. I don't know
But
why.
believe me,
It's just
Morgan,
creative
we'll find
choice.
an answer.
When,
But,
Doctor? We need it right now.
I personally
need it.
prefer Neville, like the novel.
You're the only one
And,
who wasn't afraid to come
you
here
know,
today.
at this point,
What's
he's
gonna
kind of
happen,
like
Dr. Mercer?
Dr. Jenner. Like, he's staying at his post.
Is everybody in the
Will
world
Smith
gonna
version of
die
Neville.
before
He's
someone
staying
finds
at
the
his
answer?
post,
No, I don't think so.
He's just,
I don't deny there's some
he has
strange
nothing else to do
evolutionary
but
process going on.
continue his research.
But mankind
and
won't be
do
destroyed.
what he can to survive
The fact
as he
that you
slowly
and I are
succumbs to
working here
madness.
today is evidence of that.
So, I really like these pre-apocalyptic sequences because they give a very, very good clue as to
All right,
why
let's roll.
things are going on the way they were. And now he sees the army truck leaving his house, so we know that his daughter has succumbed, and his wife, who also has the disease, is catatonic because in trying to get help for her daughter as she worsened in the virus, when the daughter died, they came and took the body. And this reaction is
When?
interesting because Neville,
When?
I'm just going to refer to him as Neville.
Doctor, I had to.
I told you not to call anyone.
Bob,
Uh,
she's blind.
The man of
She couldn't
science is
see.
basically saying we should
She
have
kept
kept our
reaching
mouth
out her
shut.
hands, groping for me. Then, all of a sudden, she was gone. And they
So
came
now, the
I
reality
had
is
to
hitting him
stop
hard
them.
at home.
They took her.
I saw a truck out there. Was that it? Was it?
And now we see the fire pit as it appeared, as the world is transitioning to this post-apocalyptic landscape. And keeping once again with
ladies, nothing I
the
can
look
do.
of the film as it originally was presented.
Let that truck
in
through.
black and white.
Get out of the way.
And it's also
Get back,
the fact that it's
folks.
at night.
Nobody's allowed
I
out
don't
there.
touch anything here.
Please,
Then I
all of you,
cleaned
get
it up a
behind
bit,
those lines.
but other than
Look
that,
sharp there.
it is
Move along.
exactly as it was meant to be seen. albeit in a slightly lesser resolution because this was really meant to be streamed on mobile devices like a tablet or a laptop. If you're watching this on YouTube TV or something like that, you can watch it, but the resolution will not hold up on 4K, I'm sorry to say. It's not that it actually looks better than I remember seeing
I said,
it
did
in
this
my
truck
eye.
just come in from Market
Watching it
Street?
on
Mister,
a
I don't know.
65-inch OLED display that's 4K in my home. But, you know, if I could go back in time and redo this, I probably would have gone for a sharper resolution. But since this was, again,
Hey, you
mostly
don't
an
belong in here. Get
experiment,
out.
I just went with the lower
I said
resolution
get out.
because
I want my
anything
daughter.
that is
Mister, a lot of daughters are in
a
there,
higher
including
resolution
my
is
own.
going to take a lot longer to upload to YouTube in general, despite whatever faster speeds we have today. So you can imagine a movie that's basically an hour and a half probably would take more than 2 hours easily to upload, depending on the traffic on the servers and so forth. So we've seen how the world has steadily become eerily dark and dead and empty. And, we're starting to get closer to that time period where he becomes
Mom, I can't see.
not just the virologist, but now he is
Verge.
the survivor. And this is an important sequence because this is when he finally gets it put into his face that his friend was gone. And you'll see in a moment when that is, because that's what concludes the main flashback arc in the film.
Verge.
Let's just say his wife pays him a visit later on. So, as I said, there are differences between this movie version and the original book. There's no escaping that. Any film, whether it be the Lord of the Rings
I won't let
trilogy,
them put you there.
does have
Verge.
differences from the books
I promise.
to the movies. Or
I won't let them put
Denis
you there.
Villeneuve's Dune adaptation is not a strict adaptation of the book. But you know something? In both cases, the filmmakers are smart enough to bring their vision into being that for all the differences, you still feel like this is the book that I read, seen through another filmmaker's eyes, the totally different medium. Even the David Lynch version holds up well in spite of itself and the constraints that were put upon him that were totally unenviable and were a life lesson moving forward from that time period. We make mistakes in life, and this is an example of a big mistake for the Neville character, which is, he is ever the pragmatist. So even in the face of death and signs, rather than do what he's supposed to do, which is burn the body, he's going to bury it. And then later on, when he's in the post-apocalyptic scenes, rather than even checking to see if these people are indeed dead, albeit the undead, he's just killing anything that's alive that he believes is infected. And that is ultimately what brings about the sobering ending to the story and in the book. He has become a legend. He is a legend to the survivors that are infected but not vampires per se, like the creatures in this version of the story or in the book. He is the last man on earth, the last human being. So now we're going to leave the flashback sequence.
Who is it?
And go back to the post-apocalyptic world as the
Who's
truth
there?
now stands before him. And I like this with the door. Again, Walking Dead reminds me of the early credits for those early seasons. You know, I open the door, and hello there. There's his wife. And okay, we're now back to that rustic, post-apocalyptic color palette that I've already said ad nauseum uh, is the majority of the film. You know, outside of the dusk and dawn sequences and whatnot. So, the next part of the movie that I kind of don't like is the dog scene. And that's just because I love animals, especially dogs. I have a dachshund, and I've grown up with dachshunds all my life since a little kid. I've had now maybe 3 of them, and or 4 actually, and you know, we have you know, his first encounter with something living, and we see ever the pragmatist, which is defaulted in this character, I believe. You know, when he's given something, a gift, rather than try and utilize the gift, give it a chance. You know, you think the scientists, even if we found something that was effective, they were still conscious. Maybe he would try and take a chance, like the Will Smith character did in the 2007 version, you know, to try and find a cure. Well, unfortunately, you know, he doesn't, this particular version does not play that way. So I kind of don't like this because, spoiler alert, he's going to kill the dog. Okay, and, you know, at least it doesn't happen on screen, but it's more than implied. So, you know, here's the fascist architecture from the Mussolini era, I believe, behind him.
Hey,
The
boy, where
brutalist
are you?
architecture that exists, I think, in Rome. That this area has been filmed in other movies before. I've
Where
seen
are
it
you,
used
pal? Come
in
here.
Titus Andronicus, I think, with Anthony Hopkins, and which directed by Julie Taymor. It's a great adaptation of the Shakespeare play that utilizes a mix of modern and you know, vintage or ancient spaces to get across that, you know, as Shakespeare, you can basically take it and, for lack of a better expression, his work transcends time and place. So that's why we have so many adaptations that take
This
place
is Robert
in
Morgan.
eras that never have been.
If somebody can hear me, answer me. For God's sake, answer me.
So now you think that, okay, he has
This is
suspicions because
KOKW
he's seen
calling.
staked
KOKW
dead
calling.
people, as you saw
Answer me.
before when he was looking for the dog. And what are his actions? You know, okay, I'm good. There might be people out there. The dog has come back to him. Okay, so what's he do? Well, I already said what he's gonna do, but you know, that is, I think, the fall of this character is the fact that in all the versions, you know, what we basically have is a broken man that, you know, he's brilliant on one end, but like all of us, you know, sometimes we have to get out of our own way, and that's the hardest thing to do in life sometimes. We can be our best friend or our own worst enemy. And there's no, in this version of the film, as well as the other versions, I would argue that Neville is both his own best friend and his own worst enemy, ultimately, in all 3 theatrical versions, to his doom. Okay? So, you know,
Now we've got
we
you all
have
cleaned up.
this, you know, very, very sad
You're gonna feel
story,
better.
and,
I'm gonna put you down
you know,
here now,
at
and
this point,
you can rest.
you know, you got to give Vincent Price credit because he carries this movie. He's the only really American actor, I think, in the whole film. I think, you know, he's the star of the movie. Everybody else He's, nothing against actors that are foreign film actors or whatnot, but the reality is that he's carrying this film on
You
his
know
shoulders,
they're out there, don't you?
and the same way Charlton Heston
You
carried the
poor,
film, the same way
driven
Will Smith
thing.
carries the film. Um, for that version of the story, the
Everything's gonna be all right.
if Vincent Price
Nobody's gonna
was
hurt
not a capable
Everything's
leading
gonna be all
actor
right.
for genre films,
All
this
right.
film would have never worked.
You're going to get better.
And I think that that's the reason why
We're gonna have lots of happy times
people
together.
like Tim Burton used him.
You'll see, everything's
in,
gonna be
Edward
fine.
Scissorhands. He's an icon, much like Christopher Lee, much like Boris Karloff, much like Bela Lugosi, much like Peter Cushing. He's an iconic actor that has been in so many genre films, and yet he also has a distinguished career in being in films that are genre films, but we don't necessarily think of them like The Song of Bernadette, for example, or of course Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments. He is the Egyptian that Moses ends up killing later in the story. So, once again, madness is setting in. You really got to feel for this character, and you got to give Price
What's the
credit. So,
use?
again, I reject the notion that he was miscast. I think he's perfect for this role, and I'm a Vincent Price fan, and I love his work. He had a distinct voice, a distinct style. There's a reason why, even later in his life, you saw him on the Brady Bunch when they go to Hawaii. You see, Michael Jackson, used him for the Thriller song. The reason being is that Vincent Price has a quality to him that, is unique. He has a speaking and a style that, actors today have, like Christopher Walken. Christopher Walken's mannerisms and style, his personality, is part of what makes him an actor that people gravitate to. Jeff Goldblum is also another one like that. It's like, sometimes it can be with Jeff Goldblum. Jeff Goldblum is starring as himself in a movie, but nevertheless, if Jeff Goldblum doesn't bring his own personality quirks into a role, people, I think, would be disappointed. So when you see Jeff Goldblum in the movie, you want that Goldblumism, if you will, those types of mannerisms, and I think it's the same thing true with Vincent Price. When you see Vincent Price in any sort of film,
I'm not going to hurt
from
you. Wait!
his last film,
Wait!
Edward Scissorhands, to his earlier
I
work,
couldn't be out here in the
you
daylight if I was one of
specifically,
them. You know that they can't come out until
want
sundown.
to, you want
Do you
his
want to come with me or do you want to
idiosyncratic
face
tendencies
them?
to be a part of the character. In fact, all actors put themselves in their role. They define the character and find the character filtered through their own being. So, it would not be the same film any more than originally Arnold Schwarzenegger was going to be cast in the I Am Legend draft screenplays that were being done before the Will Smith version. Back, I think, when Ridley Scott was involved with the project. So, Vincent Price, if you were to cast this with somebody else of his time period, it would not be the same film. And I think he's part of the reason why this film has stood the test of time, if not for mainstream audiences, definitely for cult audiences. I told a friend of mine that I was going to do a voiceover for this film, and she told me, "Oh my God, that's one of my most favorite movies." And I thought to myself, yeah, a lot of people love horror films, and it's not just torture porn or anything like that. In fact, I think the best horror films inspire dread and show you less and imply more, kind of like Alien, that sort of thing. Sometimes war works, but it's kind of like cursing in films. A lot of times I think it's really weak when, especially like even on television streaming shows, where they just drop F-bombs
You
for the
feeling
sake of
better?
dropping F-bombs, as opposed to
Would you like a cup of
using
coffee?
them as they should be, which is
Thank you.
to punctuate a scene or define a character. So, I mean, you got people in the new Star Trek saying the F word more
You
so
seem very well
than,
organized here.
you know, than the character of Negan did
My name is
ever
Ruth Collins.
on The Walking Dead. And if you've read the comic book, you know every
was
other word
married.
out of the character is F, 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 F to a
I lost
comedic
my
effect.
husband.
And wisely, Jeffrey Dean Morgan,
You are
has
alone.
his own take on the character. So he's filtering the original
were
comic
married.
book adaptation to how
Yes.
the character is written for him
Children.
and to how he interprets it and brings out the character.
daughter.
And it's one of the better things about The Walking Dead. And it's kind of ironic because that's why the character goes from being a villain to a kind of anti-hero of sorts. And is largely responsible for them winning the Whisperer War storyline in both the comics and the television show. So here we see once again
What are you doing?
the pragmatic nature of the character. He's been
Please
so
stop,
lonely.
please.
He's now
Stop
found
it,
this
please.
woman that can't survive
You're
him.
making me sick.
And yet,
Why do you turn away?
Please.
Why do
You
you
know.
turn away?
And now he's like throwing garlic on top of her, accusing her of being infected.
You are infected.
Much like
No.
in the Rivera films or in The Walking Dead or something like that, where if you're bitten
Infected
by a
systems
zombie,
are allergic to
you're
garlic.
infected. Of course,
You think I'm one
as
of
we
them.
already know from
You will
watching
be.
both Rivera films and The Walking Dead, everyone is infected.
You've made up your
And
mind.
we also
Just
know-
because I...
You can't change the
Uh,
facts by talking.
Facts.
That aside
What
from
facts?
Neville's
That I got
own
sick.
uh,
I've had a sensitive
immunity
stomach
to
all
it,
my life. I saw my
everybody in the
husband
world,
killed, torn to pieces
uh,
right in front of
those
our
who,
house. I've been
survived,
wandering ever since.
like this woman,
Hiding at night.
and
not eating
those
more
who
than
are then
scraps.
dead or
Sick with
died
mourning.
and were
Sick with
prevented from
fear.
coming back,
Unable to
they're
sleep.
all infected.
And you
Even
shouted at me.
Vincent Price's character, in a
He
sense,
chased me
is
across a field.
infected
Hit me.
in the
dragged me
just
to this
only
house.
in terms that you got to imagine.
And to
that
top
the
it all,
virus
when I
is
get sick
probably
because you shove a
trying
piece of
to
reeking garlic in my
infect him
face.
all the time since it's
You tell me I'm
airborne.
infected.
However, he has that immunity, much like
Where
some
are
Let
you
me
people.
going?
go.
You can't
You know,
go out there. It's
are
almost
more
sunset.
Let me
susceptible-
go,
are more
I
You can't
susceptible
go
to
out there
things
now.
than
In a few
others,
I don't
minutes, the
care.
streets will
which
be
is,
full of them.
Go.
out of the horror.
At
I don't
least let me give
care.
you a
Things that,
blood test.
We went
touch
through a
me.
pandemic, and
Touch me.
it was one of those things where,
Don't touch me.
prior weaknesses in the immune system made you more susceptible. And believe me, I know this
You must be
perhaps
hungry.
better
I'll
than a
fix
lot
you
of other
some dinner.
people. But I don't want to go into that here. You're not here to learn that. You're just here to, if you've listened this far, it's either because you like hearing my voice or you just want to my take on the film. So, that's what I'm trying to deliver. I really love this
You know
movie.
you should eat.
I don't,
I can't.
I believe it or not, I don't even have a copy of it in my Blu-ray library. I should get it, but I've seen it so many times on video that I guess it's kind of, and being the fact that
You
it
seem
is in the
used to them.
public
Oh,
domain,
as much
you
as
can,
anybody could be.
download pristine
I'm not
copy
frightened of 'em
legally
anymore,
from
if
the Internet
that's what you mean.
Archive, which is
I protect
where I
myself
usually
against them,
get
but only because
my
there's so
source
many.
materials from.
Individually,
when I
they're
do
weak,
work with public
mentally
domain
incompetent,
pictures.
like
Um,
animals after a
you know,
long famine. If they weren't, they sure would have found a way of breaking in
it's
here.
one of
a long
those
time
things
ago.
where it's nice to have it for archival purposes, but
Hear that?
being this is in the public domain and
That's Ben
and
Cortland.
there are licensed
He was my
copies that
friend.
are being distributed
He was like
by
a kid
people,
brother.
uh,
If I could
different
find him
companies
and
that
destroy him,
specialize in that, and then your
But
more
you said
premium companies
he
like
was your
Criterion
friend.
Collection, for
when I
example. I'm
find him,
surprised
I'll
that
drive a
Criterion
stake
hasn't
through
done
him
a
just like
version
all the others.
of the Last Man on Earth. I think it deserves it. I mean, certainly, it certainly
you
I think
lived through
belongs
all
up there
this.
with their other releases
Do you know
like
why?
Night of the Living Dead and
Perhaps I was chosen.
the some of the other
That's
horror
a
films
lie.
that they've distributed, like Carnival of Souls.
Or
by
perhaps it's
Herc
because
Harvey.
a long time ago when I worked in Panama,
these
I was bitten
movies,
in my sleep by a bat.
There's a reason why they're
My
popular.
theory is that
and
the
it's-
bat had previously
whether it's a
acquired
B
her
movie
germ. By the time it entered my
which,
blood, it had been
you know,
strained and
that,
weakened
you know,
by the
sometimes you have
VAT
those
system.
movies that are
As a
so
result,
bad they're good.
I have immunity.
And then you have movies
it's
that
only
are
a
good
guess,
on
but
their
it's all I
own
have
and
to
they're
go
not
on.
bad. They may be flawed, but they stand
You
the
don't
test of
think
time because
that I'm immune.
there is something that connects with people.
you?
And that's basically
It's a
all
simple
you can
matter
hope
to
for
find
with
out whether
any
you are or
type of
not.
film or television program or whatever, which is that you hope that somebody will connect to your work
will you
and
do
find something in
if
it
I am
that
infected?
they
Cure me?
are going to fall in love with
You
in
don't
some
have to
form. I
answer.
think it's
I know
something that
as well
a lot
as
of
you do.
filmmakers bring to their projects.
It's
You look at
incurable.
Francis Ford
There
Coppola's
might be a way.
best work,
If not of
which is
killing the germ,
in
at
my
least of
opinion, it's the
containing it,
1970s
keeping it from
film,
spreading.
The Two Godfathers,
If I had the
Apocalypse Now,
equipment, the
and
time,
I particularly like
But you don't.
The Conversation. You know, those films, you know, they have his thumbprint on it. Martin Scorsese, a master filmmaker, it has his thumbprint. Steven Spielberg films have a thumbprint to it. And Rivero's films have a thumbprint to it. You know, when a directing style is so strong, you know, people gravitate to it in the same way they gravitate to a brand of liquor or a brand of food or just anything that is a brand, you know. So, you know,
you are one of them.
I love Christopher Nolan's
And without that
Batman
injection, I'll be
trilogy
one again.
and the Dark Knight
What do
trilogy.
you mean?
And
You found
you
the
know,
solution?
for me, that's
right.
my favorite
Exactly as you
Batman
said it could
outside
be.
of Adam West. But I love Adam
I
West
take that
Batman for
for it.
totally different reasons. That as a kid, seeing a repeats
What
on
is it?
television, I didn't necessarily
Decyphernated blood plus
get
vaccine.
that. All right,
The
it's
blood
campy
feeds
to
the
begin
germ.
with, but that
Vaccine keeps it
Adam West
isolated.
is playing it for
It
more
prevents
than
it from
just
multiplying.
camp. I mean, there's real
I've had it for
comedic
some time now.
quality to his work. And
We-
you know, if you've ever heard Conan O'Brien discuss his
There
work,
are quite a number of
and
us.
the pilot that
And I
they
thought you were
trying to sell
alone.
with him in it.
I
uh,
was going to cure you.
Adam West was
Does
a
that
very
amuse you?
gifted
No.
comedic actor, and
Now, I want
you
the
know,
truth.
even Vincent Price has a
I
bit
want
of
all of
comedic
it. Why are you
timing
here?
to him. I mean,
To find out
his,
if you know any more than
perhaps
we do.
Abbott Costello and
You know,
Frankenstein
poor
at the
Les.
very end,
We're
the Invisible
alive.
Man's voice
Infected,
is
yes,
none
but
other
alive.
than
We're going to
Vincent
reorganize
Price.
society.
I find that appropriate, especially
Do
since the
away with
original
all those
Invisible
wretched
Man, as far as I
creatures
know,
who are neither
was
alive nor dead.
portrayed by Claude
Start
Rains,
everything all
who
over
would
again.
go on to so many noteworthy pictures
And you
before
want me to
returning to
join?
genre films later in his life.
You can't join us. You're a monster to them. Why do you think I ran when I saw you? Even though I was assigned to spy on you. Because I was so terrified of what I'd heard about you. You're a legend in the city, moving by day instead of night. Leaving as evidence of your existence bloodless corpses. Many of the people you destroyed were still alive. Many of them were loved ones of the people in my
So
group.
now we see the fruit that he
I
has
didn't
brought
know.
upon himself,
Is there any way you can
the-
get out of here?
what he's
What do you
sown, what he's reaping in, which is
They're coming after you
people
tonight.
fear him, and now these
That's why I was
survivors
sent
that
here.
have found a
Prevent you from resisting them.
solution to living with the
supposed
virus in their body. They
to
they
keep
have
you
not
here
found a cure.
until they
They
come.
see him as the
To kill
biggest
me.
threat because he has never made any
Yes.
distinction between
Your new society
living
sounds
dead.
charming.
and the
Beginning of
infected
any
but still
society
alive.
is never charming
you
or
know.
gentle.
And so, you know,
And
I
you
mean, we saw
pretended
what
to
he
be
did
shocked at
with
my
the
violence.
infected dog, albeit
Well, what are you
thankfully
waiting
we didn't
for?
see him actually kill the dog on
Why don't you
screen.
go
It's-
on and use
He's
it?
got
Get
like
it
a little
over
steak
with.
sticking
Use
out of
it.
it
Get
because
it
he goes
over
to
with.
bury it. And we see what he was willing to do to her. I mean, he ran after her, brings her to her house, and then after a few minutes, he's shoving garlic in her face, saying, "You're infected, you're
Now
infected."
you know.
And here she is telling him,
What are you
point
going
blank, you know, my
to do?
people are going to kill you because of what you've done. You're a monster to my people. They don't want you to cure them. They want you dead. And it's a tragedy because of the fact that, you know, in this version and in the Will Smith version as well, when he's offering a cure, the creatures that exist in the Will Smith version, those CGI things that look like bad Emotep from The Mummy, Arnold Vasulu type characterization, and also over here you have the alive but infected human beings that have a source that keeps the virus off, but they have to constantly. It's kind of taking a drug for the rest of your life to keep a disease at bay. That is what they have discovered and what they live with, and because of that, they don't recognize that Neville has synthesized a cure. And as we see here, that is what he's going to do. And so he's the last man on Earth. But in the end, I don't know for sure whether she is truly uninfected, because there is a point where she's assaulted when the final sequence begins in the film. But nevertheless,
What are you doing?
if she is
It's already
cured, then
What?
yeah, there is some hope for humanity if there's somebody that's able to synthesize a cure from her blood, since that's what he's done.
Look!
But otherwise, she then is the new last person on Earth, the last woman on Earth. And ironically, there's a Roger Corman film called The Last Woman on Earth, I believe. And
You see?
you can actually see
It
that
worked,
as
Ruth.
well. I have a copy of it, I believe.
The
on my,
antibodies in
streaming
my
channel.
blood
I have
worked.
over 200 public domain.
My
films, all
blood has
different
saved
types,
you,
so,
Ruth.
check
Do
them
you know
out
what
if you
this
have
means?
a chance.
You and
This
I can
is just the
save
first
all
one
the
I've done a
others.
commentary for.
We won't be
I've done
alone.
some
We'll
things
never
that
be
I pulled
alone
back from
again.
mini documentaries, if you will,
Sure.
featurettes, discussing films.
Wait.
But I've never done a commentary before, and so yeah, I'm a little rusty because this is the first time I'm doing it. But I'm getting more comfortable with it, and like I said, you learn by doing, and this whole thing is just a learning process, and I hope that comes through clearly.
Don't be afraid.
Regardless how many times I repeat myself, I hope that it comes through clearly, and that in spite of all these things, you enjoy it for what it is. Because, it's not in life. We all, the joy of life doesn't come from necessarily owning things. It's from sharing things.
Where
It's
are you
from
going?
have to get out of here.
sharing things
Tell
that
them
we
you're not
have.
a
And
threat
when I
to
say
us.
that, I don't
Save
mean
all
like
of us.
sharing
Please, when they
everything
come
like,
here, there won't be
oh,
time
well, I
for
bought a
questions
house
and
and I'm going to go
answers.
share it
They'll
with
come to
some people I
kill.
don't know.
For God's
No,
sake,
that's
Robert, let me
obviously
go.
a little bit overboard.
Robert, please.
But at the
Ruth,
same
look,
time, we
tomorrow.
can share compassion for each other. We
Please.
can share our interests with
Robert.
each other.
Tomorrow.
When you have your friend
Tomorrow
or
will
your
be
lover
all right.
over, or your family over,
Robert, no.
you're sharing experiences, and that's what makes the movie theater type of event, like going to a church or something. You are sharing in a unified experience with strangers, and I don't think
Robert.
that
Yes,
no
Ruth.
matter how great they make
But if
home
this doesn't
cinemas,
last,
But it
etc.,
will.
and how
I've
easy
already
it's
checked
going
it
to
under
be
the
to
microscope.
just watch movies
Wait,
at
I'll
home.
show you.
Nothing will ever replace
I'll
the
prove it to you.
theatrical
I'll check it
experience.
again.
And while, yes, sometimes people talk and do things like have their cell phone go off or whatnot in a movie, and people can be rude, there's a lot of times also where the crowd makes the movie. I mean, I remember seeing The Empire Strikes Back in 1980 at the Lowe's Astor Plaza in Manhattan, and
Ruth, just take a look at this.
that crowd experience.
This'll
It's
prove
something
it to
I'll
you.
always go through,
Ruth, there's no change.
in my
I've double
life.
checked.
I'll always remember that, and how the roar of the TIE fighter,
Ruth,
even though it was surround
Ruth!
surround
Robert!
sound,
Ruth,
if it was even
get away
that,
from her.
seemed to go from behind, past,
Are you
and
all right? Are you all right?
right by and beyond my ear. As you see here, here's his undead friend, and now here come the people that she was warning him about,
Run, Robert! Robert, run!
In the book, he also
Run! They've come to kill you, Robert.
The book is somewhat different, but nevertheless in terms of the ending, but it culminates in basically he is legend. He is,
Run!
he's
Run!
ironically the monster to other monsters because of his pragmatic ways. And that's, is what leads to his downfall, and that's what adds to the gravitas of the book and the various versions of this type of storytelling.
Up there!
And this part I always find weird because unless they're using wooden bullets, if they're vampires, bullets on a vampire. I guess we'll never know. At least not in the context of this film.
There he is.
Wait! You don't understand! Wait!
I'd like to know how they all got like black outfits on like an army. I don't know. It's kind of strange considering. I guess they went to the same looted out store or something like that.
Wait!
But I don't know. I guess it's just a weird thing. You have to differentiate them in some ways. All of these infected but not undead human beings going as opposed to being shambling
This way! Hey, over here!
creatures
This way!
wearing,
Cover outside!
whatever they died in. Those are the other infected who are in fact undead. So, we're coming up to the last moments of the last man on Earth. And I really appreciate you all watching this with me, regardless of whether you only watch it for a few seconds or you stuck in the entire feature-length presentation. It's not easy to do this sort of thing. I mean, it's a learning curve. I remember when somebody who knows got a YouTube channel, is fairly successful. Because when you run a YouTube channel, you have no idea what the responsibility and work is for when it's successful. And, I'm still beginning, but I have, gotten, thankfully, a lot of people that, like watching what I choose, etc.
Stand back!
And, I want to celebrate things of the past partially because I think we can learn a lot about ourselves in the present. And, this is, again, the type of sharing. I mean, you don't have to be of the time period to appreciate it. When you go to film school, most of the films that you watch in the beginning, whether they be Washington or these are movies that came out when I was born. So those of you who are younger than me, you're probably watching lots of films like Rocky that came out before you were born.
There he is, in the church.
Star Wars, that movie hit me when I was 7 years old. Perfect.
Over there.
But nevertheless, I love this is an outlet to express those things. And, I just feel that, if I can help other people in my own way, then it's worth it. That's how I feel about it. And I think any other filmmakers, that's what it's about. It's sharing your point of view. It's not about necessarily having people agree with you. It's just sharing and absorbing. You're never going to like everything somebody else likes. But you're not necessarily going to hate everything everybody else likes too. We're all different. Yes, there's extremes. But I find that most people are not black and white. They're just different shades of gray. Much like a black and white picture. And so, why not put different tones and filters and mix them up in a film like this? Because it's a lot like people, you know? There are good people and there are bad people, and then most of us who are somewhere in between. We have our faults and we have our positive parts. We can minimize those faults and use the positive aspects to our personalities, our souls, our being in general to help make the world a better place, because it is only you and your own inner world that you can really truly try and control. You're never going to change the world without working on yourself. And with that,
All
that
of
is
you.
the end of my commentary.
All of you freaks.
For my version
Mutation.
of The Last Man on Earth. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks again.
Hold it!
You're freaks. I'm a man. The last man.
Robert.
They were afraid of me. They were afraid of me. They were afraid of me.
I didn't know. Don't cry. There's nothing to cry about. We're all safe now. All safe.